If your institution isn't represented in the response, or worse, misrepresented, there may be no next click.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday I'll break down what actually matters, fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. On today's episode, students aren't just Googling where to go to college anymore. They're asking ChatGPT, and more than half say the answers are better than what they get from a search engine. So if AI is the new front door to college search, will your college show up? Joining me today is Jason Smith, founder and managing director of OHO, the digital strategy firm behind the new research on how AI is shaping the college search process. Jason has spent his career at the intersection of design, messaging, and technology. He's launched award-winning websites, led breakthrough user research, and helped institutions rethink how digital strategy drives enrollment, brand, and business goals. And as a researcher, he brings sharp insight into how shifting behaviors, especially among Gen Z, should be changing the way we think about digital content, personalization, and AI readiness. Now, Jason, welcome to the Pulse. Before we hit record, we were chatting about our busy upcoming summer months, your youngest daughter's graduating from high school and going off to Michigan. You've got at OHO a Dallas boot camp coming up. I mean, are you even going to be in Massachusetts for the next couple months? It sounds like it's busy.
It does feel like the COVID year is finally over, which was turned out to be 5. I thought we'd be back and traveling, but it feels like it all hit in June this year. So we got 4 or 5 trips coming up. So it's a busy time, which is a little bit of a surprise. So I'm getting back into the swing of collecting frequent flyer miles.
Well, last week on the Pulse, Marina commented that May felt like the month of 1,000 days. And that was very work driven. It feels like at the very least, this travel you have and your daughter graduating, at least there's some personal fun and all of that, right? Do you get to explore the places you go to when you travel for work?
I do. During COVID, I was I'm tired of these day in and day out trips. So I do try and fly out in the afternoon one day, at least get a chance to I love walking. So I love getting out to take a walk, check out the city. I also love eating. So don't mind finding a nice place to eat dinner. Yeah. So that's a good way. Yeah. I do have a running list of, restaurants and typically bakeries that I do want to hit up when I get into the city. So.
Ooh, well, I've got a lot of travel coming up as well. So I know who I'm going to hit up. Exactly.
Ideas, yes.
Always excited to find a foodie who has good restaurant recommendations. So get ready for that. All right, folks. Well, let's get into our topic today. There's a new front door to your institution, and it's not your website. OHO's latest national survey confirms what a lot of us have noticed. The way students research college is changing. Nearly a third now say they've used generative AI tools like ChatGPT or Gemini to explore their options, and over half say the answers they get are better than what they'd find through a traditional Google search. This is a behavior shift in how decisions start. We have spent years optimizing for search, building SEO strategies, designing web experiences, even mapping prospective student journeys. But now more and more of those journeys are starting in a blank AI prompt. And if your institution isn't represented in the response, or worse, misrepresented, there may be no next click. And that's the shift. AI isn't disrupting how we market, it's reshaping how we show up. So the question for enrollment and brand leaders isn't, should we care about AI and search? It's, how are we showing up when a student doesn't search at all? They just ask GPT. And that's what we're unpacking today with this great research from OHO to back up the entire conversation. Now, Jason, according to your research, nearly a third of students are using those Gen AI tools to search for colleges, and over half say those results are better than Google. How big of a shift is this in the context of how digital college search has evolved over the last decade?
Well, I mean, if we take a look at the decade, right, I think part of the research we looked at is asking the question sort of, what are those primary influencers for students, right? And so the top 5 right now continue to be sort of relationships, so friends and family. Social media and the website are almost tied in sort of 2 and 3 there. And this is the first year where social media was just slightly higher than the school website. Online discussion boards and email round out the sort of top 5 there. And so I think if you look at the sort of the macro change, like how much like AI is not in the top 5, have those things changed? Those are actually pretty stable over the years, right? And I think that one of the bigger shifts we're seeing is this kind of move towards like what students, for undergraduate, which is mostly what we were looking at here, what was the driving reason when we first started doing websites 15, 20 years ago? It was like, I want to know what it feels like. They were looking to say, like, come to the website, give me a sense of what the school feels like. I think the bigger shift is that we're seeing more people go to social media and then also to online discussion boards. And I think that represents some of that feeling a little bit of, I want a more authentic experience. I want to understand the unvarnished portion. Like when students said, like, I know that you're going to show me the nicest building at campus. I don't need to see that. Like, I want to see what it's really like. And so I think, those top 5 things are pretty stable with social media and online discussion boards kind of bubbling up a little bit higher. I think maybe the second way of looking at it is like, I think that AI is really a continuation of what we called sort of this like 0-click search, which is an idea from SEO that as Google built out more stuff around search results, like knowledge panels and the teasers, and the people also ask questions, that people were not clicking. So they would search, but they would not click. And so we called that a 0-click search. And it was somewhere, people debate, 40 to 60% of search traffic just doesn't ever make it to the site. So at one level, like, we've had this problem for a long time already, right? Like that's been around for 5 or 10 years already. So I think AI is just a continuation of this problem. Like suddenly we're in this world where like the website, the link might not even be there, right? We're just getting information. And so in both cases, your website is still the authoritative source of that information. It's just not the destination that people are going to. And I think this is a continuing trend. So it's interesting to have these kind of 2 tensions where some stuff is moving very slowly and not changing, frankly, that much. And the other is we're seeing a drive to social media and a drive to kind of more authentic channels. And then we're having this exasperation of the problem that we've always had, that people are not clicking through to our website from Google in general.
Right. And so the research that you did, and you kind of referenced this, but it said 8% of the respondents cited AI as a major factor, right? So like you said, didn't even make the top 5 there. But certainly, I think more and more students are going to AI to begin the search, maybe not make the final decision, but at the very least build their consideration set, right? So as somebody who has built their career helping colleges show up in that search, if students are asking AI instead of going to Google and maybe never even landing on your homepage in those early days, what recommendations are you giving to institutions around what a strong digital presence looks like today?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. Like, I think increasingly being more direct, clear, and sort of really getting out of our way as an institution, right? I think treating our websites is a little too precious. And I think this is a little bit of a hangover of like, the website was like, we had view books, 25, 30 years ago, right? Print things that we mailed to people. And the website sort of became a online version of that. But I love this one quote from one of the participants in the survey. He said, like, I don't really go to websites except to complete tasks. Like, I use ChatGPT, I use YouTube, I use Google Docs, or websites of companies jobs I'm applying to. Like, and I typically just look at their design. I think it's fine, but I'm mostly there for the functionality. And I think this sort of mindset, like even when we ask students, like, show me like sites that you go to, I would say much more stripped down. Like, this generation like lived through COVID, right? They had an online experience that was Google Classrooms. Like, that was their world, right? And so I think we see a kind of design aesthetic that is much more like, I'm here to do work. Like, I'm not here to browse. And even if you look at the shopping and the different activities that they do outside of that, it's very minimalistic, right, in terms of the design. And so I think we need to wrestle with that as schools to think about how do we make it really direct and clean, and this drive towards functionality, drive towards like improving transactions on the website, I think is a really big piece. And again, I think the website continues to be an authoritative source of information. Like one of the data points from the survey was, I think something was like 58%, I think said, yeah, I still want that authoritative content. And that was like, I want to look at the authoritative social media channels. It's not that they don't want it. It's just how they want it. They want it fast, easy, direct, clean. And so I think that's a lot of how we think about synthesizing the site, how we think about bringing, the kind of academic product offers to the front, making that easy, not making them, again, continue to learn our internal org structure in silos. I think we've got to get through a lot of that.
So this is a very human first response that you just gave me. And I think there's a big conversation happening right now around content for AI versus content for humans. And so in your work with your college and university clients, how are you guiding them in terms of that content strategy to serve both? Or I guess maybe the better question is it even possible to serve both?
Well, I think it's interesting, Rick, because at one level, and again, this is all like a little more secondary reading in terms of us trying to figure out like what do we recommend on SEO? How do we continue to move forward? Generally, right, like the LLMs are still like they still need to access content. So stuff that was important for users and for SEO is continue to be important. So speed of site, clarity, making sure that you're not being too precious, I think, with your content, with your language. Like I think readability is really important. So like, I mean, if you break it down to things that are important for readers or users and important for LLMs or SEO, right? Readability, governance to make sure that you don't have the same content in like 5 different formats and 5 different things across the site, and it doesn't know which one to use, which is a user problem and a SEO problem and an LLM problem, and then content, like direct looking for answers. I think all that's really important. So I think there is some overlap around those. I think as we think about like, what does the user experience really want? I think what we're really seeing is this, there was a talk about like hyper personalization. I think that's really hard for higher ed to do at that level. But I think there is the ability to curate experiences, right? So saying like, I picked these 3 stories. So just like you and I having a conversation where you're like, tell me, about this city, give me 3 curated examples. Like I'd be like, oh, Mallory, you would love this and this and this.
These are my future restaurant
These
recommendations.
These are your future bakeries. Yeah. You'll be having a cookie here and you'll have a croissant there. Butter and coffee will be had. So I think, we're really trying to find a good way to kind of curate that experience and think about how can we help people find the information that they're looking for. And I think that is asking, what are users really looking for? What are they responding to on social? What are they doing in other channels? How do we kind of help tell the story overall? I mean, curate that so that they see that you're the right fit.
So let's get even more tactical for a moment. We prepped for this episode, so it's like insider ball game for listeners. We prepped for this episode a couple weeks ago, and then just over the course of the last week, Google made some major announcements where they're rolling out AI mode and AI overviews across US search results. So even more important on the day that we're recording and dropping this episode than when we prepped just a couple weeks ago, right? Search is becoming less and less about clicks and more about context. And, how prospective students are finding and evaluating colleges is clearly changing. So if I am a marketer on a campus today, what do I need to go and do after I listen to this episode to make sure that my content is more AI friendly? Like this is a new search environment. And so whether it's, the design of the site or the language choices, the structured data, how we're using our H2s and H3s, like what are some really tactical tips that someone can go put into use today?
Yeah, I think it's a few of the things I've already said. Like I think having sort of, clear sort of repeated terminology, making sure you're using the same term, across the board, that you're explaining what that term might look like, avoiding the kind of overly clever, flowery language for a lot of those things. Headings, listings, direct phrasing, stuff that makes your content more scannable for users, easier for search engines, like as you mentioned, the headers and things like that. I mean, for a while, and I think this is sort of, all news in the last, 5 days here about sort of Google's change. I think, we're really thinking about the people also ask questions was, generally when this kind of 12 months ago, when sort of this first started popping up in Google, I think that's really what it was doing. It was just using natural language processing to grab a couple of those. People also ask questions and make something that sounded better on the front end, right? And so it was really just using search kind of components. Now we're moving to that space, you're right, where we're not, rank is less important as opposed to finding that information and, reading, watching some of the Google videos on this stuff. And like their whole purpose is to trying to get you, to the information as fast as possible that's most relevant. So it doesn't matter if your website ranks first or ranks 100th if you have the most helpful information. I think some other areas people are looking are like longer tail searches, right? Like just the whole query is different, right? So whereas people might have searched something very short and specific, like graduate programs in, Washington, D.C., right? They, something very general or kind of broad, but sort of geographic based. They might say best, program that with a bunch of qualifiers and nights and needs can be completed in X months, right? Like that's a really different answer, which you're not going to rank first. Like you're never going to rank first in Google for that, but you might have the most direct answer and Google's trying to find that content and put it together. And so I think making sure that we're being clear and we're looking at that sort of search information, I think is really important. So I think for now, clarity, good search engine optimization practices are still there. And I think we're all learning together. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think structuring content for LLMs, and I've heard that, generative engine optimization, GEO, is the new SEO. Right?
I hear a new one. Yeah, I hear like SGE. And then I read one that was like AIO yesterday. And I was like, I guess that's AI optimization. I was like, I don't know which one to use. So,
the world needs more acronyms.
Yeah, we need more acronyms.
Nobody can understand. Yeah. A couple of the tips that I've just seen out in the wild as I've been catching myself up on all of this. One was to use your H2s and H3s like headline prompts. And I liked that. Like AI models want to use headers to identify content hierarchy and topic segmentation. So if you can make each header like a searchable question or a more declarative statement, that can help the LLM read it. And then one other one I saw, and actually I'd love your opinion on this, was to embed FAQ sections. And I feel like I've sat through a lot of Digital Collegium, formerly High Ed Web presentations, where people are like, get rid of the FAQs. If you have FAQs on your website, like you're not really answering the questions. So then I come across this recommendation. I'm like, oh no.
We have that same debate all the time where I was like, the content strategists always are like, no, we don't do that. And I'm like, it's like, but do you think it'd be helpful? Because, like we would say this, the kind of people also ask questions, which who knows where they'll end up if those will go away. But for years, like, it wasn't like you had to write one page, but you did have to write like the recommendation from an SEO perspective was a very discreet, make sure you write the answer clear and direct and answer the question in 2 to 3 sentences. And that could be anywhere on the page. Like, as you're saying, like the headline, an H2 or an H3 on the page with that one sentence somewhere, 1 or 2 sentences buried in, 2 or 3 paragraphs. That's okay. Like that was a fine strategy, but it also seemed like the context in that, I think, does help you. I'm not sure. I think sort of short FAQs, I don't know how effective they would be, but I could see some longer form content. I mean, that's basically what we're doing. We're just kind of burying them in text pages as opposed to having an FAQ link someplace else. So,
Hey, it's Mallory. Quick thought. What if your team didn't have to worry about what's getting missed after hours? What if your campaigns kept moving, your segmentation kept updating, and your students kept getting support while your team focused on the big stuff? That's what a digital workforce makes possible. Element 451 is helping marketing teams rethink how work gets done and who's helping it get done. See Bolt Agents, the digital workforce for higher ed marketers, live at the Engage Summit this June. Register at enrollify.org/engage and use the code ENGAGE50 for $50 off. All right, back to the show. So as we wrap up our conversation today, I want to talk about next steps and bring it back into your research, right? We've referenced that only 8% are saying that AI's actually influenced their decision, but also your research kind of got into something that you've acknowledged, that students are asking for, like the queries becoming longer tail, and the students are asking for more personalized recommendations, like based on their GPA, their major, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess to wrap things up with a nice bow, like what does this all signal to you about where this is going? Like if you could look into that, 5-year forward crystal ball, and is there something that higher ed marketers need to stop doing based on all of this data?
Well, I think a thing that I've been, so we run these online boot camps, and there are these free events in person as well as kind of online. And I think one of the things we're seeing is, we had a session around AI and having people search AI. And I think a lot of us have used it, right? Obviously, we just get it in Google for the most part at this point. And some of us go to ChatGPT and ask questions. But I think I've been surprised at the number of people who haven't really just dug into Googling what I would consider paths or using chat to kind of go through the path of a prospective student. Just ask the questions that they might ask, like compare these programs, do this sort of activity. Because a lot of what we saw in the research was what I would consider like pretty basic search terms, like things that you would see people doing. More advanced users were doing these much more comparative type searches where they were, one user, my favorite one was one user was like, hey, I want to apply to graduate school. What are the 5 questions I should be asking myself? And then chat got those answers, gave them back. The person wrote out answers and then put those back into to ChatGPT to ask like, now tell me what school should I go to based on these things? And then it asked them to create a persona of what each of the students was like. We didn't see a lot of that. We saw like a few people, like 2 or 3 people did something more complicated like that. But I do think taking these sort of, as admissions people or marketing people, we know the questions that people ask, and we should just put those into chat and see how we're showing up. And then I think this will get people going. So I've been really surprised in these sessions of like, we give people a series of things to do, and they're kind of surprised and their eyes are sort of open. So I would say, first, start there. If you haven't done that, like think like a prospective student, go to one of these tools and use it. Second point I would say is really just to streamline your website overall. So being clear and direct wherever possible, thinking through like how do we centralize information and content so that we don't have things spread across the website that might be confusing or complicated for users. So I think really the website is still going to continue to be important and that source of information. So we really want to make sure that we get that forward.
All right. Now, listeners, before we wrap, if you'll be at the CASE Annual Conference for Marketing and Branding Professionals this week in LA, come find me. I am moderating the keynote panel on Thursday morning. It's called No Wizard Required, Courageous Leadership for Women in Higher Ed Marketing. Yes, it obviously was inspired by the Wicked movie and musical. We will be in green and pink. The panel and I will be exploring what it means to lead with conviction in environments that weren't always built for us and how to move forward without waiting for someone else to grant us permission. And I really hope I will get the chance to meet many of you in Los Angeles. All right, Jason, before we wrap this up, one more question came to mind. You just have so much experience working with .edu websites, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on where institutions are most vulnerable to being invisible in these AI-generated results.
I think the areas that there's kind of 2 areas that I would think about, and one would be sort of admissions, the brand, the kind of customer journey sort of experience. I think one area to think about, and we're building a chatbot, an AI chatbot for one client, and we were taking a look at sort of where the results were coming from. And it did a great job. Like we asked it very specific things. It gave us 4 really great responses. And the 5th one, I was like, oh, that looks good too. And then one of the VPs was looking at it and was like, oh, that doesn't exist anymore. And it actually had come from a blog that someone had written. And I thought this is like one of these like very interesting things. And I think why it's helpful to go back and clean up your content is because when we came into the AI, like AI treated these 5 things exactly the same. It put them in the same format and the structure. And so what I think is really important is that we're losing context, right? And then we've lost, if I'd seen that blog post, I would have said, hey, that's from 2018. I should probably make sure that's still real. Like you and I as users know that. But chat just made it say like, well, that thing, I found this thing, let's throw it in there too. And so I think, if I had to say like, it's part where it's invisible and in part where you might want to think about cleaning up things. And again, to that point of like being direct, being clear, we really do need to make sure like what is getting all this content that's out there. Should we leave it up there? Should we have all of these things available? And also, can we sort of start, creating structures where we make it really clear, like this is the authoritative content that we really want. And so, I'll pitch it, I think at the end to kind of come back and think about some of the things we've been talking about, how to be direct, how to be clear, how to make sure that you're retiring old content, and that you're really thinking through sort of, making sure that you don't have things that are confusing users out there.
Well, and I think you said it about 20-ish minutes ago very clearly. none of these things are new problems. We just have an AI wrapper now, which in a lot of ways is accelerating, the tension and the need to address a lot of problems that have already existed. So in some ways, AI can be that Trojan horse everyone can rally around to hopefully get the website content up to date. Jason, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And listeners, like I said, I hope I get to meet you in LA this week. Looking forward to it, y'all. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.